Como é que queria ser me, baby?
October 19th, 1972, I became a widow. After that, I needed to work. I thought about it. I had spoken foreign languages, I'd lived overseas, and I had a master's degree, so I decided to apply for CIA.
Foda-se, vai ficar
It
assim.
wasn't It wasn't that easy, though. They wanted to make me into a secretary, but I said no. I really wanted to be a case officer. I really wanted to do covert operations. And eventually, I became a CIA officer during the Cold War.
People today don't realize how serious the Cold War threat really was. I don't think it's an exaggeration that our survival was at stake. They were antithetical to all the values that we held as a country. We were democracy. They were totalitarianism. We were faith. They were atheism. So it was a real battle. It was often what we'd call a Manichaean struggle between good and evil.
Como
Let us be aware that
os
while
Estados Unidos tacando
they
a
preach the
força de
supremacy
bad
of the
guys, né,
state,
mano? Foda.
declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual
se
domination of
revolta.
all peoples on the earth. They are the focus of evil in the modern world.
Ronald Reagan called them the evil empire. I don't think that was too far-fetched. The nuclear threat was real. In our relationship with the Soviet Union, we felt very strongly that we could have gone over the edge. We almost did.
When it comes to nuclear war or the threat of it, what really matters is knowing what's in your adversary's game plan.
If our policymakers are operating in the blind, if they're basing their decisions on their fears, their notions of the Soviet Union that weren't valid, that could have been really dangerous. So they needed intelligence on the Soviet Union, and we weren't getting it at that time because our Soviet operations were obstructed by KGB surveillance. They were always there. So our job was to get human sources undercover on the ground in Moscow. So we were looking all around the world for Soviet recruits who were vulnerable to our approaches, to our blandishments, who we thought we could turn. And we found one in Bogota.
We became aware of him through a telephone tap that CIA had on the Soviet embassy.
He was doing things in Bogota that showed that he might be vulnerable.
He womanized, he liked parties, he was fast and loose with money.
All of those things we saw. And clearly he was not a real communist. He wasn't a true believer.
So we arranged for a meeting with him in the Turkish bath in the Hilton Hotel.
We started talking to him. He wanted a better life. He wanted to do something that he could really believe in. Ideologically, he was clearly on our side. He didn't like communism. He believed that the American system was superior. All those things kind of came together. We realized we could make a deal with him, and we did. And that was Alexander Ogorodny, a foreign ministry official for the Soviet Union, And of course, the first issue that came up, we needed a code name for him. We certainly couldn't refer to him in the cable traffic as Ogorodnik. It wouldn't be secure. So right from the beginning, he became Trigon. We knew that he was scheduled to rotate back to Moscow in a very short time. That was going to be our payoff. That's where he was going to have the access that was going to make a lot of difference. But the big issue was, can we handle him after he returns home?
Moscow was considered the most difficult place in the world to operate.
We'd never done it before. How can we operate in Moscow under the noses of the KGB and get our job done without getting caught? In terms of risk, it was life and death. By 1974, we had recruited Trigon, a foreign ministry official for the Soviet Union, and he was scheduled to return to Moscow. Now we've got him recruited. The big issue was, can we handle him after he returns home?
Moscow was considered the most difficult place in the world to go out and collect intelligence from agents on the street.
In Moscow, you've got to understand the KGB was all-powerful.
I spent almost 40 years in the KGB. My most important job was to watch my own citizens. I mean, dissidents, people who were, for some reason or another, unhappy. That was my job. And Moscow was the capital of the country, the headquarters of the security and intelligence. We had total control at that time.
The KGB ran that city. They had virtually unlimited resources. The number of people that they threw at us in terms of surveillance and technical coverage was unbelievable.
The KGB kept an eye on all foreigners who came to Moscow, plus the Soviets who had contacts with the foreign organizations. Total surveillance of everyone.
Olha que bagulho louco, né? A KGB, se você chegava lá na Rússia, tipo, na época da Guerra Fria, se você encostava o seu pé lá, meu parceiro, já fica ciente que, tipo, ia ter um espião atrás de você pra ver se você não era um outro espião. E se você fosse, você tava na boqueta.
They were everywhere. They controlled every institution. They had people in every housing block.
At the time of the Cold War, the KGB was really the most powerful organization in the world.
So once Trigon went back to Moscow, he was in a cooling off period. He was being alert to any indications that he was under suspicion. We wanted to do that before we ran the risk of actually operating with him in Moscow. If he were captured, it was a question of survival.
Well, all the traitors in the Soviet system would be just sentenced to death. You will not live anymore.
It was dangerous for our people too, but we needed that intelligence, and Trigon was our chance to show that we could operate successfully in Moscow. To do that, we had to evade KGB surveillance. And the one idea that we had was to use a woman, because we knew that the Russians did not use women for dangerous operations themselves.
There were no women in my time in the Soviet intelligence or counterintelligence. They were technical personnel, providing all the necessary documents, making copies, going to pick up a lunch for you. Women were thought sort of not quite reliable, so they would pick up only men, no women.
Engraçado, né? Olha de quem vem esse de tipo, olha, mulher não é confiável, só homem. Engraçado, vindo da onde? Dos Estados Unidos. O país que até a Segunda Guerra Mundial os caras, tipo, proibia se você era negro de você entrar no exército porque você não podia, você não podia porque você era uma sub-raça. Então, se você, mesmo se você entrasse, você ia se armar com sucata, tá ligado? Arma velha, os caras estavam um pouco se fudendo pra você, entendeu? E tipo, mesmo que você entrasse, você não poderia ficar no alojamento dos brancos e os brancos te viam tipo como um nada, tá ligado? Nem pra morrer você prestava pros caras, entendeu? Antes de qualquer missão, primeiro ia uma rapaziada branca, depois ia os negros pra fazer missão básica. Tipo, um esquadrão aéreo de negro. O esquadrão aéreo de negro só fazia reconhecimento em áreas que não tinha muita importância pra guerra, então os caras metiam o louco, entendeu? Mas por mim, botava gente branca pra morrer que se foda. É melhor do que eles falarem assim, ó, vocês é preto, então vai tudo na frente aí, vocês tomam bala primeiro e depois nós vem só limpando. É o caralho.
We thought, let's use our male chauvinism against them. Let's find the right woman, someone who is bright and disciplined and tough and who can learn denied area tradecraft and who can be buried deeply inside the U.S. Embassy in Moscow under deep cover. And that was Marty.
Marty.
In 1975, I was trained in the hot summer of Washington, D.C., and I took Russian language. I learned how to spot surveillance on the street. I took covert pictures.
She was a natural. She had a real aptitude for clandestine tradecraft.
During my training, I read about Trigon. In the file, I remember reading that Trigon believed he could change his system from within. I think deep down in my heart, I really believed that I could do that too. Because at that time, the men in CIA were the case officers. They were the people in the field, but I knew I could do as well.
Deixa eu ver se já caiu essa porra dessa live aqui. Que o YouTube tem dessas, né? De ficar derrubando a live dos outros. Aí, ó.
In the KGB, my most important job was to watch my own citizens. I mean, dissidents, people who were, for some reason or another, unhappy. That was my job. And Moscow was the capital of the country, the headquarters of the security and intelligence.